The migrations of the Cimbri tribe through Gaul and nearby regions had disrupted the balance of power and stirred up conflicts with other tribes, such as the Helvetii, who were incited to confront the Romans. The Romans faced an ambush by the Cimbri and a temporary rebellion in the town of Tolosa, which led to the deployment of Roman troops in the area. The proconsul Quintus Servilius Caepio regained control of Tolosa, after which he adopted a defensive strategy, waiting to see if the Cimbri would make another move towards Roman territories. On October 6, 105 BC, the Cimbri did indeed advance. Even before the battle commenced, the Romans faced difficulties. The senior consul for that year, Publius Rutilius Rufus, a skilled and decorated soldier who had fought in the recent war in Numidia, did not take charge of the military campaign himself. Instead, he remained in Rome while his inexperienced colleague, Gnaeus Mallius Maximus, led the legions north. The reasons for Rutilius not assuming command are not known precisely. It is speculated that he might have faced political opposition due to his friendship with Gnaeus Marius, or he may have believed that Mallius Maximus deserved the opportunity to earn his own glory, or perhaps Rutilius was simply temporarily ill. Two significant Roman forces were encamped near the Arausio region on the Rhône River. One was led by Mallius Maximus and the other by the proconsul Quintus Servilius Caepio. As the consul of the year, Maximus technically outranked Caepio and should have been the senior commander of the combined armies according to the law. However, due to Maximus being a novus homo, a person from a non-aristocratic background, and lacking military experience, Caepio refused to serve under him. As a result, Caepio established his camp on the opposite side of the river from Maximus. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an eerie golden glow over the vast expanse of the battlefield. The air crackled with tension as the Roman legion, led by the valiant legate Marcus Aurelius Scaurus, faced off against the fearsome Cimbri warriors. It was a clash of cultures, a meeting of two worlds on the brink of chaos. Scaurus, a seasoned soldier with a heart ablaze with Roman pride, had been tasked with leading a detached picketing group to scout the advancing Cimbri forces. Little did he know that this encounter would forever etch his name in the annals of history. As the Romans marched with determined resolve, the distant rumble of approaching hooves grew louder. Scaurus raised his hand, halting his men, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Dust clouds billowed on the horizon, and soon, a formidable force emerged, a vanguard of the Cimbri, a fierce Germanic tribe. The clash was sudden and brutal, caught off guard by the ferocity of their adversaries. Caught off guard, the Romans swiftly formed a defensive line, shields raised and swords drawn. But the sheer numbers of the Cimbri overwhelmed them, like a tidal wave crashing upon the shore. Scaurus fought valiantly at the forefront of the battle, his sword slashing through the air with precision and strength, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. However, the tide soon turned against the Romans, as wave after wave of Cimbri warriors crashed upon their shield wall. Scaurus, seeing his men falling around him, their bodies crumpling under the weight of enemy blades, refused to yield. He fought with a ferocity born out of desperation, his eyes burning with a fiery determination. The Romans fought valiantly, their disciplined formations slicing through the chaos of battle. Yet, the Cimbri were relentless, their sheer numbers overwhelming the Roman lines. Scaurus fought with the heart of a lion, his sword a blur of deadly precision. But even his prowess couldn't stem the tide of the Cimbri onslaught. The battle raged around him, a symphony of clashing steel, desperate cries, and the sickening thud of bodies hitting the ground. As the Roman ranks crumbled, Scaurus found himself surrounded, his sword arm-weary but unyielding. In a last desperate surge of defiance, he refused to be taken alive, cutting down his foes with a desperate fury. But in the end, outnumbered and overwhelmed, he fell, a prisoner in the hands of the Cimbri. Bruised and bloodied, Scaurus was brought before the imposing figure of King Boiorix. The king's gaze bore into him, his face a mask of fierce determination. Scaurus, though beaten and broken, stood tall, his spirit unbroken. He spoke with a voice that carried the weight of a legion. "Turn back, King Boiorix," Scaurus declared, his words laced with an audacity that defied his captive state. "For if you continue, your people shall face the wrath of Rome, and your legacy will be naught but ashes and dust." The king's face contorted with anger, his pride wounded by the audacity of the Roman captive. In a fit of rage, Boiorix bellowed his command, and the fate of Scaurus was sealed. Bound by honor, the Cimbri warriors carried out their king's sentence with ruthless efficiency. As the executioner's blade fell, a hushed silence engulfed the battlefield. The wind howled through the rugged terrain, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. The Roman camp stood, surrounded by an air of uncertainty, as the Cimbri warriors loomed on the horizon like an unstoppable force of nature. Among the Roman soldiers, tension and anxiety coursed through their veins, for they knew that their fate rested on the outcome of this impending battle. General Caepio stood at the forefront, his eyes hardened with determination. He had defied orders, driven by a potent mix of ambition and fear of being overshadowed by his rival, Maximus. The Senate's command echoed in his mind, a direct order compelling him to cross the river and engage the Cimbri. But even then, Caepio had insisted on establishing a separate camp, ignoring the counsel of Mallius. As the hours slipped away, doubt gnawed at Caepio's conscience. He questioned the recklessness of his decision, knowing that the hasty nature of the assault would be his undoing. Yet, a flicker of hope burned within him, a hope that victory on this day would secure his name in the annals of history. The morning of October 6th arrived, painting the sky with hues of gold and crimson. The Roman soldiers prepared themselves, their hearts pounding in unison. The sound of battle drums thundered, echoing through the valley, as Caepio led his men forward. A resolute spirit surged through their ranks, each soldier ready to face whatever awaited them. As the Roman soldiers charged forward, their swords gleaming in the fading light, they were met with an unexpected wall of resistance. The Cimbri, fierce and formidable, stood firm, their eyes burning with an unyielding resolve. Shields clashed, and the air became thick with the metallic scent of blood as the battle unfolded with a ferocity that shook the very ground beneath their feet. The Cimbri, seasoned warriors, met the Roman onslaught with unyielding resistance. Their shields formed an impenetrable wall, their weapons striking with deadly precision. Blood spilled upon the ground, soaking the earth in a crimson tide as men fell, their cries lost amidst the chaos of battle. The battlefield became a swirling maelstrom of violence and death. The screams of the wounded mingled with the anguished shouts of the dying. Bodies piled upon bodies, forming macabre hills of flesh and steel. The stench of blood and fear hung heavy in the air, an indelible mark on the memory of all who witnessed the horrors of that day. Caepio's men fought valiantly, their swords slashing through the enemy lines. Blood stained the earth, turning the once green grass into a crimson battlefield. The scent of iron mingled with the acrid tang of sweat and fear, filling the air with an almost tangible weight. But the hasty nature of the assault soon became their undoing. Outnumbered and outmatched Roman army of proconsul Caepio was completely annihilated. Caepio's hasty assault had left their camp virtually undefended, a fatal mistake that the Cimbri ruthlessly exploited. Like a ravenous horde, Cimbri surged forward, their war cries echoing triumphantly across the blood-soaked plain. The once proud Roman camp became a scene of pillage and destruction. tents were torn asunder, treasures looted, and flames danced hungrily across the abandoned structures. Caepio had escaped the battle, physically unharmed, but his spirit bore the scars of defeat. His decision, driven by ambition and ego, had cost the lives of countless soldiers and left their legacy in ruins. The Cimbri warriors, emboldened by their recent triumph, stood as an unstoppable force, their eyes gleaming with savagery and victory. The infighting among the Roman commanders had weakened their ranks, leaving them vulnerable and exposed. The Cimbri, sensing the vulnerability of their adversaries, now launched a ferocious assault to Maximus's army. Their battle cries echoed through the air, drowning out the anguished cries of the Romans. The Roman soldiers, already demoralized by their recent losses, fought with a mixture of desperation and resignation. They swung their swords and thrust their spears, their movements mechanical, as if driven by sheer instinct. Each clash of weapons brought forth a spray of blood, the ground becoming a graveyard of fallen soldiers. But the camp's poor positioning left them trapped, their backs pressed against the unforgiving river. They were cornered, their escape routes cut off, and the realization of their imminent demise hung like a dark cloud over their heads. Fear gripped their hearts, mingling with the cries of anguish and despair that echoed across the battlefield. Amidst the chaos, the Roman soldiers fought for their lives. Some attempted to break through the enemy lines, desperately hoping for a chance at survival. But the Cimbri warriors were relentless, their tenacity unmatched. They hacked and slashed, their weapons finding their marks with deadly accuracy. The river beckoned as a glimmer of hope, but it stood as a formidable obstacle. Crossing it while encumbered with armor seemed an insurmountable task. Yet, some Romans, driven by a sheer will to live, took the plunge, braving the treacherous waters in a desperate bid for freedom. Their bodies were weighed down by the heavy burden of their armor, their movements sluggish, but the desire for survival burned bright within them. As the battle raged on, hope dwindled like a flickering candle on the verge of extinction. The Cimbri closed in on their prey, their victory assured. The Roman soldiers, resigned to their fate, fought with a grim acceptance, their eyes haunted by the horrors they had witnessed. In the end, very few Romans managed to escape the clutches of the Cimbri. Their survival was a fleeting glimmer of light in the midst of overwhelming darkness. The river claimed the lives of many, its currents swirling around the fallen warriors who had sought refuge within its depths. According to Livy, who cites Valerius Antius, the recorded Roman casualties were immense, with approximately 80,000 soldiers and an additional 40,000 servants and camp followers losing their lives in the battle. The defeat at Arausio had a profound impact on Rome. It not only resulted in a significant loss of manpower and military equipment but also left the Alpine passes undefended, with a formidable enemy camped nearby. The consecutive defeats and the calamity at Arausio raised alarm among the Roman people, as they began to question the competence of their leaders. The blame for the defeat fell largely on the arrogance of Caepio, rather than on any shortcomings of the Roman army, fueling popular dissatisfaction with the ruling classes. Fortunately for Rome, the Cimbri turned their attention towards clashing with the Arverni tribe and delayed their advance into Italy. This respite allowed the Romans to regroup and reorganize their forces. The catastrophic scale of the loss at Arausio affected both the aristocrats and commoners alike, prompting the Roman Senate and the people to set aside the usual legal constraints. They waived the requirement that prevented a person from being consul for a second time until 10 years had passed since their first consulship. In this critical time, the skilled general Gnaeus Mallius emerged as a prominent figure. Despite his absence, he was elected as the senior consul only 3 years after his first consulship, due to his proven capabilities. Unprecedentedly, he continued to be elected as senior consul for 4 consecutive years, making him the commander-in-chief of all Roman forces throughout the duration of the war. This decision marked a significant departure from the usual political practices, reflecting the urgent need for strong leadership in the face of the ongoing crisis. The Romans sought to restore stability and regain control by entrusting Marius with the responsibility of leading their forces against the Cimbri threat.